Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast post-game edition. Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack here on a Saturday night 16-13 victory from Camp Randall over the Wisconsin Badgers. Ducks improved to 11-0 for just the second time in program history. The other time they went 12-0, they made the national championship. Maybe that's we're telling here. But this was not the game I don't think any of us maybe expected. Jared's the only one that predicted a Wisconsin cover, but Jared, did you think it was going to even be this close? I don't. None of us did in the press box.
No, there were maybe some of the makings for it to be close, but everything had to go wrong for Oregon, and a lot of things did go pretty wrong to start off for Oregon going into the game. So it was much closer than I anticipated, though.
16-13. They held Wisconsin to, I think, 0 first downs in the fourth quarter. They had 2 turnovers, one on a turnover of downs, 1 interception to basically seal the win. They had to convert a fourth down conversion by Dylan Gabriel. Heck of a throw on a night when he was not near his best to convert a fourth down. And then 3 plays later, Jordan James scored the go-ahead touchdown, or the touchdown to tie the game.
Right.
But just a clunker. This was not a good game. And if Wisconsin had a better quarterback, they have pulled off the upset probably.
Yeah, this is – I don't know if you agree, Jared, watching at home. This was pretty close to the worst quarterback Oregon has played this season. And certainly when the game mattered most, it just wasn't given much of a chance there. And we were on the field, we should say, for the last couple of sequences, and I haven't seen the replays from the press box angle. And so maybe the throws looked better on TV, but it looked like he wasn't particularly close on a lot of the incompletions there with the game on the line. And this is an Oregon podcast, so let's turn it back and talk about the positives in terms of how they closed the game.
Defense is phenomenal.
Defense played great. As you said, I think it was 21 fourth quarter yards allowed in this game. They get the big interception to seal it. There were some really nice sequences in the first quarter. It's just in the middle of 2 quarters, Wisconsin was able to run the football. And the game script, the way it was going, seemed like it was playing in their favor before we got to the fourth. And, of course, things really seemed to change there. They play jump around, and usually that's kind of a rallying cry for the home team. And it seemed like it was a rallying cry for the Ducks, who were also very animated, jumping around, literally dancing, taking part in it. Dan said that they'd played it throughout the week of practice. And, I don't know necessarily if they don't do that what happens, but it did seem like there was a little bit more energy. And obviously the very first play out of that is that 4th and 9 that
switch was flipped.
Yeah, that's what Bryce said and a couple of other players said after this game. But I don't know, Jared, like what stood out to you in the middle 2 quarters? Because this is a game where Oregon played, I thought, pretty well in the first quarter offensively and very well defensively, with the exception of finishing drives in the red zone. And in the middle 2 quarters, it was really ugly kind of for both sides of the ball.
Yeah, definitely. Overall, I thought it was a fun game. It was a good, close, combatant game, real like Big Ten style, tough nose, hard defense. I had to run the ball to win the game, convert on some 3rd and longs, and Oregon had the better quarterback there. Defensively, I thought that Wisconsin just took it to them in the second and most of the third quarter. Ran a lot of plays where they were just cutting edges, which is something that Jordan Burch is so good at, and he obviously didn't play today. And Mateo and Tatum, that's something where they have to grow because they're just sophomores and they still need to get stronger and bigger at the end of the day. But Wisconsin's offensive line, Dan talked about it all week long, and that was a huge strength of theirs. That is not a small unit of people. I did a story earlier in the week. I think the smallest guy in that offensive line is like 6'4", 302 pounds. So not a small unit at all. And they just kind of had their way with Oregon's defense in that second quarter. A lot of it was just limiting the amount of penetration that Oregon got from their interior defensive linemen and Jamar Caldwell and Derek Harmon. That was such a key factor in the first quarter, which, when they have like -3 running yards in the first quarter for Wisconsin. And a lot of that was because Caldwell or Harmon would bust up the middle, and then the running back would jump to the outside, and there was enough time for read and reactions there from the linebacker duo to go in and clean up the mess. So that just didn't happen in the second quarter. There were some missed tackles. There were some really good play designs. It was very clear that with the added bye week, Wisconsin had honed in on what Oregon did not do well and spent all of their ammunition in the second quarter of how can we attack this? How can we get out to a lead here? And they did exactly that. They just, like I said, ran out of ammo for the rest of the game. It was like, we know that they struggle with this. Oregon made an adjustment. They said, okay, we know that you're going to try to do this. Here, we're going to try to stop it now. Real time, really try to stop it. And then they couldn't do anything else. So it was pretty clear that what they wanted to do, it's just that Oregon, squandered some opportunities in the first quarter there. They could have been up 21-0.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like this. So,
Points
or even just 13-0, 2 field goals and the Dylan Gabriel red zone interception. So just squandered opportunities. This would be a completely different game if those go another way. But again, it's why you play the game. You can't just assume what's going to happen. But in that second quarter, it was pretty clear from my vantage point of watching the game where it's like, all right, they're going to give it their all right here. Wisconsin is, and they did it. And then they just didn't have anything else for the rest of the game.
We should note, this is the most hostile place they've played in all year.
Mm-hmm.
And they trailed for the first time at half since Boise State, week 2 of the season. And they took the punch to Jared's point of they took everything that Wisconsin had in those second and third quarters. I mean, things played out exactly like Wisconsin wanted to start the second half.
Yep.
They gave up a first down or two, but they got a punt. They go get the ball and they go down the field. They score a touchdown. Or no, they didn't score a touchdown. They scored a field goal.
And that was key, by the way. That was really important that Oregon got the stop there.
But they chewed up a huge chunk of time, and they shrunk the game to the point where you were like, if Oregon doesn't score on this upcoming drive, they may only get the ball 2 more times with how much clock Wisconsin was bleeding. And they took the punch, and they stood it, and they come back and win. And as Dylan Gabriel put it post game, it wasn't pretty, it wasn't clean, but winning is hard. And we've said this before, winning in November is hard. And they I want to say they passed the test, but C-.
You won the game.
Yes, you won the game.
You passed the test at least.
It's all that matters.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
It's all that matters.
They're 11-0. That doesn't happen very often.
Exactly. And so now you get the much needed bye week after the 8 weeks of straight football, and this team needs it. We've seen Tez Johnson go out with injury. Marcus Harper was out with injury as well.
Jordan Birch this game.
Did not play in this game. Jamari Caldwell left the game on the final defensive play of the game with an injury. Dan said he was
fine.
He was fine, but the way we saw Jamari on the floor of the field, don't want to read too much into it, but it's if he's fine, it's a hell of a recovery.
It would happen right in front of us, and he was definitely in a lot of pain. And maybe it was as simple as he got his wind knocked out of us. We didn't get good replays. Back to the Wisconsin offense just briefly, but and I would imagine you might agree with this, Jared. It felt like Wisconsin's success was almost all predicated on what happened on first down.
100%.
When they,
it was very similar to Purdue.
I do not know why they threw the ball. They averaged negative 1.4 yards per play on first down when they threw the ball.
Yeah, they had no success throwing the football in this game. And to your point also, I thought the game shifted when Wisconsin said we're going to run off tackle primarily on those downs.
Exactly, yeah.
Oregon was so good in the middle of that defense, and Harmon and Caldwell both played
tremendous,
awesome games early. I thought the linebackers played really well when it was between the tackles, but started going off tackle. And as you said, Jared, the size and kind of the inexperience maybe of Mateo and Tatum, who both had, I thought, good games, especially on pass downs. I thought that really showed up in certain moments. They're just not able to set the edge, and that was a big turning point. And that was why, as you said, Matt, Oregon had its back up against the wall, and it was I thought because Wisconsin shifted its offensive game plan and went to something that Oregon didn't have much of an answer for until late. And what really benefited Oregon was obviously tying the game and then forcing a situation where Wisconsin kind of got away from
I think, right?
They got away from its run game. Yeah. And they threw the ball, I think, on first. I think it was
on first down.
Yeah. And so that to me was really significant in this game for the defense. What do you think was wrong with the offense, I think, at times here? Because that to me felt like
the easy answer. It was just there were a lot of lack of execution moments today for Oregon's offense. There were a lot of missed blocks. There were and I have to give a lot of credit to Wisconsin's defense. They played phenomenal. A lot of the times, Oregon runs these quick hitters to the outside with Tez or whoever it is, in hopes that you get 4 or 5 yards, obviously, but you hope that somebody misses a tackle on the outside and 4 to 5 yards turns into 10 to 12 yards. And that basically never happened the entire night. I thought the tackling was really sound for Wisconsin. We expected this going into the game. It's a well-maintained defense, and they execute at a high level. But Oregon's blocking was not necessarily from the offensive line either. Like, I thought the perimeter blocking was pretty poor. I thought the tight end blocking was pretty poor. Like, on the fake field goal at the end of the game, that's a touchdown for Ross James if Patrick Herbert hits a block. And he had a previous missed block on the last drive too. Like, there were just a lot of execution problems with Oregon's offense. I thought that they should have attacked with the run earlier in the game.
Yes.
We talked all week about how Wisconsin's rush defense wasn't great. I felt like they were trying to force some things. I thought Evan Stewart had a really good day. I thought Gabriel had really good moments, but again, just kind of force-fed a few things. They looked to go down the field a lot, which I appreciated. Just didn't really work out. I think it was a lot of execution problems, more or less. Like, I think there were a lot of things that they can improve upon, but they just couldn't, and they just kind of shot themselves in their own foot a lot too with the execution problems.
How much does the narrative change with this offensive issue if Terrence Ferguson literally doesn't get sniped running down the field and just catches that ball? Because it was right on the money. And
I think it was a good ball.
Yeah.
He catches that, he scores. And we get the home run threat. We get the offensive touchdown.
The game script changes, and Wisconsin's now playing in a tie game as opposed to with the lead. Yeah.
I mean, but that's to Jared's point of, like, there was just a ton of execution issues, whether it was what Wisconsin did to force them or just simple self-inflicted wounds that Oregon did time and time again. And I can't go back to think, without saying, like, I wonder how much of this is credited towards the lack of having Tez Johnson on the field. It just feels like they don't have the guy that Jared brought this up in the previous show. Like, who's the safety valve? Who's the guy that you need a play, you need a moment, you need a first down? Who do you look to do it? And it just feels like that guy is not here. I mean, they've got guys that Dylan naturally gravitates towards. Ferguson's one of them today. Evan Stewart early was that guy. But the guy that gets the ball and makes one and then makes two guys miss and turns a 4-yard play behind the sticks on 3rd and 7 into a first down. Like, that type of playmaking ability is missing from this offense. And I wonder how much against Maryland last weekend and now against Wisconsin this weekend, that lack of playmaking ability is impacting the offense.
Well, I'm just looking at the targets here. It's pretty clear today, at least, who the favorites were. 19 of his 31 passes went to Stewart or Ferguson. Yeah. And Stewart was career, or at least a season high. I don't know if it was a career high. I don't know what
his career high is 11 catches.
Because he had 10. He was right there. And this was, there was parts of this year where you're begging, like, why isn't Evan more involved? He was very involved in the offense early. I think he might have had 6 first quarter catches or something like that. But to Matt's point, like, a lot of them were kind of, they had the one over the top that went for
32.
Yep, 32 yards. Take that out. I mean, the rest is that's 9 catches for 60 yards, right? So that's getting into kind of the range you're talking about with Tez in terms of, like, the involvement and kind of the parts of the field. But, there maybe is a little bit of a difference in terms of what they do after the catch. I think Evan's very explosive.
There's a huge difference, yeah.
But he's not Tez Johnson. And we know what Tez Johnson can do. And he made the trip. He was on the sideline with the team. You wonder after the bye week what the availability is. But I agree, like, the more games you've now seen without him, the more you've kind of appreciated how important he was to this offense. I mean, not to say the offense totally falls off because one guy's missing.
Sure.
But when it's a guy who's this involved and this talented and as we've kind of established, such an important piece for Dylan in terms of his kind of comfort and trust, this is a pretty big deal. And you just kind of hope when he's back, he's able to kind of step back out there and become the player he was before, because this offense – not that this pass offense is terrible by any means. I mean, you certainly would take this pass offense over Wisconsin's after watching that. You just kind of saw what the low looks like. But this offense really, I think, to win games against better competition, they need Tez back.
Yeah, I thought they were actually looking for just as low early on in the game as that safety valve. I thought that's kind of who Dylan Gabriel was looking for. I mean, he did on the interception in the red zone. He also threw a hospital ball to him and then knocked him out for what they said, like 14 minutes on NBC's broadcast. Apparently they're keeping track of that. Another guy went in, said it was 12 minutes. So I don't know. They must have somebody with a stopwatch up there. But I think that he could have been the guy. It's just, he was hurt. And then they didn't really play him towards the end of the game.
Gary Bryant played a lot.
Gary Bryant did play a lot. And I think that could be somebody. He had one catch, almost had a spectacular diving catch on a long throw, but just out of his hands. Like they need to figure that part out. I think it could very easily be Ferguson. It worked multiple times. Before the 4th and 9 conversion, there was a 3rd and 7 conversion earlier in the drive. And when Oregon got into that 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 mark, it was basically like was how Wisconsin played in those downs. Like it was probably a completion short of the sticks, and Wisconsin wasn't missing the tackle. So it was going to be a 4th down. And that happened probably 3 to 4 to 5 times off the top of my head. And they just need to figure out a guy. But again, we're talking about trying to replace a potential All-American, a preseason All-American, a potential Big Ten first-team guy. It's hard to do. There's not usually one of those sitting on your bench. And, it could be Gary, it could be Justice Lowe in the future, but you hope that Tez is back for the Washington game. If he's not, you just need to figure that out during practice this week. And I thought Wisconsin played Oregon really well on their defense.
We need to give them credit. I was really impressed with their ability to tackle in space, especially early on in the first quarter. There were a lot of one-on-one situations where one miss and Evan Stewart turns a 6-yard pass into a 25-yard pass. And it didn't happen all that often. They tackled really well. They showed up. And this kind of felt like, to Jared's analogy earlier of using all their ammo, this kind of felt like their last hurrah to show, like, we're a better team than our record indicates. Here we go. We're going to give everything we've got. And Oregon withstood it. And on a night where we're recording right now, BYU just lost to a 3-6 Kansas team. Like, Dylan said this before. We've talked about it multiple times on the podcast. Winning in November is hard. And this, for a long time, felt like you and me back in Tempe in 2019 against a really bad ASU team and knocking Oregon out of the college football playoffs. I mean, how many times have we seen a devastating loss? 2 years ago at Oregon State.
Right.
And this game for the second quarter and third quarter was going that way, where they were just running the football and Oregon couldn't stop it. But Oregon made the adjustments, to Jared's point, and they corrected mistakes. They found ways to win, and they're out of here now with an 11-0 record. They've gone through the 8 straight weeks of games. I think a really deep narrative of the last month and a half or so has been, the players talked about it, Dan talked about it, of the physicality of this team and the defensive mindset and being able to lean on a defense to win games. And it helps when you play a team like Wisconsin today, who's just inept.
It's
offensively.
Very one-dimensional.
Yes. Like they have one way to play, and if they can't play it, they are screwed. And that certainly helps. But we should also note, like, Jordan Birch is maybe their one or second best player on defense. And he did not play it down. And it's been 3 or 4 games now where he hasn't played. And they've played good teams without him. And you don't want to say he's not been missed, but other guys have stepped up in moments. And you can't say that in previous teams of Oregon where they've been as physical as another, as the other best teams in the country, but they've had an injury or a couple injuries, and those guys go down and the defense takes a huge drop off. This team hasn't had that yet. And I think you have to also praise, like, this team's, they are the king right now of the Big Ten, and they've taken a bunch of chances or swings from other opponents, and they've shown that they can win many ways. Offense, shootouts, and now last couple of weeks just leaning on their defense.
I had a buddy who texted me and said this reminded him of Cal in 2009 or whatever, the last 12-0 season. Of how close that game was and how the offense didn't really get anything working. I think Cliff Harris had like a punt return touchdown to rescue them. Obviously, that wasn't the case there, but it was just kind of like you're playing a team you're better than, and it just never didn't work out, but you made the plays when you needed to win. I think that's fair. This team needed a bye week. Like, this team needed a break. No one in the country had played 8 consecutive. Was asked to play 8 consecutive weeks without a break. They played the last two teams were both coming off bye weeks. Washington also will be coming off a bye week when they play Oregon on the 30th. So I think this break is going to be really important for this group. I'll be curious to see kind of if it feels a little differently. I mean, playing for 2 straight months that's hard. Tough. That's not easy to do. And I think that part brought it up in the lead in of kind of like that's an external factor that could be impactful. And I think it probably was. Wisconsin in the middle of this game especially looked like the fresher team or the team with maybe a little more energy. And then to your point, guys' point about the tackling, I felt like that kind of mitigated some of Oregon's speed advantages was just how well Wisconsin tackled it in the open field. Like it just was so infrequent that Oregon was able to get anything going down the field. And frankly, like aside from the Stewart, shot over the top, like the other big completion was the tight end screen to Ferguson. And those
or the throw to Kenyon Sadiq.
Yeah, those were like the very few times where the Ferguson one was one of the very few times they were able to set it up, get blockers in front, and kind of get hit open space. So, I think a lot to work on. I think you feel great about how the defense showed resolve late. You feel good that the offense was able to do enough, even though it got real dicey. I think this game felt like it was over a couple times. But like after the first 4th down stop by Wisconsin there where they weren't able to convert on 4th and 9. What was your perspective on the fake field goal? Because I think for us in the moment, you were kind of going like, wow, that is really aggressive. After I heard Dan talk about it,
makes a lot of sense.
I'm kind of like, okay, I get it. You open yourself to possibility.
Yeah, go watch it. Like that should have been a touchdown for Ross James. Like it absolutely worked. Patrick Herbert just went wide on his block and allowed the I think it was like a safety or a corner to come down and tackle James short of the line. I mean, my initial reaction was like, what the fuck? Why? Like all you have to do is, kick a field goal and you're up by 6 and then they have to score a touchdown. We all know that their passing offense is inept. And if if they just, they hit a 43-yard deep shot earlier in the game, if that somehow happens again and they just need to kick a field goal to send this to OT, like that's not great. But yeah, I mean, after listening to Dan, like I understand why he did it. I'm still not necessarily for it. I think you just take the points and go on with under 2 minutes remaining in a game that you were down for most of. So that's just me. But yeah, that was my initial thought on that one.
I think we might have said the exact same thing to each other as it happened as you did. I won't repeat the word because earmuffs, but yeah, that was basically exactly our reaction. And then I guess why I'm not like in support necessarily of it because I'm with you. Like the points are right there. It does at least fall in line with Dan's.
Go back and look at the drive
history
chart for what Wisconsin was doing and the history of what his.
But he's just so aggressive. Yeah. Like this is just in line with what he does. And so like, did I expect him to go for a fake field goal with your punter carrying the ball for a first down, kind of with the game feeling a little on the line? No. Am I in agreement with every one of Dan's 4th down decisions in his career? Probably not. I probably am with most of them. But this was definitely one of the bigger balls plays of his career here in terms of putting it in your punter and saying, hey, go get us this first down, go put this game away, or score a touchdown, as you said. So,
right. Yeah. That was the thing. It's like, it's 4th and 4, I believe it was. I just keep Dylan and the offense out there. Yeah. Like, I'd rather, if it were me, I'd have more faith in Dylan Gabriel getting the job done rather than Ross James. That's no disrespect to Ross James, but like, but it didn't matter in the long run. One other thing I had, just that it's hard to win, like we were talking about earlier, and Matt said about BYU losing at home to a 3-6 Kansas team. Dan basically said the same thing afterwards. Like every year, like nobody's dominant in college football. Like these aren't, like undefeated teams don't happen too often. And Dan was a part of one of the best college football teams ever in that 21 Georgia team that lost during the regular season. So, or during the SEC championship game. So, and that's one of the best teams that ever played. Like these games are going to be games that are close. It happens. It's college football. There's only ever been one undefeated team in the NFL and professional football where players are better. So it's incredibly difficult, and the fact that they're 11-0 going into a bye with one more game remaining in the regular season, I think is incredibly impressive. you were waiting for this game. Felt like there were maybe some close calls where opposing teams just made a lot of mistakes and Oregon capitalized on it recently, I should say, last 2-3 weeks. And here it was, and Oregon came out on top. Who mentioned post game that Oregon is like the only team in the country to have been trailing in the fourth quarter 3 separate times and then come back to win?
It was the ESPN reporter who I
don't know
whose name I couldn't tell you. If you go pull up the game story that they wrote, it would be whoever the author was. Yeah.
All right. Well, good stat.
Yeah. Now Oregon's 11-0, and what are the storylines to watch in 2 weeks? 12-0 season for the second time in program history. Secure your spot in the Big Ten championship. It already hasn't been. They'll probably still be the number 1 ranked team in the country. And for Dan Lanning, he's going to have to beat Washington for the first time in his career in 3 tries. And look, I know that team's completely different. The rosters for them are completely different. The coaching staff is completely different. But this is a hump that they have not gotten over. And they haven't played, or Oregon hasn't played nearly its best football coming into this one.
Yeah.
And we're going to see how important that bye week's going to be from a on-field schematic standpoint. We're going to see how important that bye week's going to be from a health standpoint. What does Jordan Birch look like? Can he get back? Does Tez get back? Does Marcus Harper get back? Justice Lowe. I mean,
he came back, but he certainly didn't seem like he was 100%. Yeah.
We did find out that Jordan James was out. I think, did you ask?
I asked him. Yeah, Jordan James was fine. Yeah, he never had any doubt he was playing in this game. So load management, it seems, or something.
But I mean, the storylines for 2 weeks. I mean, it's going to be a big one, and there's going to be a lot on the line, and it's the rivalry game too.
Yeah, no, this plays out kind of poetically, and also an opportunity, I think.
Make a statement.
Exactly. Ended on an exclamation point. Like, you have the opportunity now to not only go 12-0, as you said, for the first time since, what was that, 2010, but you also have the opportunity to do it against your biggest rival, who's been a real thorn in your side the last couple of seasons. So that's going to be a really fun game to lead up to, and a really fun game, I think, to cover. And my expectation, having watched both teams this year, is Oregon is much, much better than Washington and should win this game pretty easily. But we've just seen now last couple of weeks against teams that are much better than.
Yep.
It ended up being a little bit more tight and a little more competitive than we anticipated. So that one is going to be certainly something to look forward to on the 30th.
All right, it's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Thanks for listening to the late edition. What was that guy's?
We did run into a guy who goes by Bama Duck on Twitter, who made the drive up. I guess Pate had a quick trip had his trip. So I'm sorry, I can't remember his first name, but you were going to be listening to this. And
safe travels home.
This is our shout out to you, and we appreciated you coming up and saying hi. We had a couple of you guys come up and do that before the game, and it's always appreciated. So guy whose name I can't remember, you can DM me on Twitter, but I think it's Bama Duck. He was from Birmingham and made a 19-hour trip, it sounded like, up to Madison for this game.
But until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.